Welcome to another episode. This one is going to be very special. It is going to be about resilience, transformation, and really a powerful testimony. It's going to be about somebody who grew up in the foster care and how she transformed her life for the better.
I went through the prisons. My first recall when you asked the question was pig feet. I immediately smelled chitlins. Going into foster care, people are making decisions for you. You're a case file, you're a number. You have to learn to speak up for yourself. You learn not to trust. I was sentenced to 2 years in prison. I asked the officer for what's called an I-60, and I placed my abuser's name on the I-60. Just have like a light bulb moment. You're not responsible for people abusing you, but you are responsible for how you respond. You're more than what has happened to you. Your story doesn't have to stop. You've got the power to change like the next chapter in your life. My last 6 months in prison, my mom and I were put on the same unit.
Hi, everyone. My name is Winnie Jean-Pierre. I am your host. Welcome to another episode. This one is going to be very special. It is going to be about resilience, transformation, and really a powerful testimony. Our guest here is going to introduce yourself. You don't want to miss this one. It's going to be about somebody who grew up in the foster care and how she transformed her life for the better and what she's doing now to help others. And we welcome Miss Veronica. Veronica, thank you so much for joining us. Can you please introduce yourself? Give us a formal introduction. Who are you? How did you get into law?
So my name is Veronica Lockett, and I'm from Texas. I got into law by way of social work. I, like you said, grew up in the foster care system. I went through the prison system, experienced domestic violence, and after that, worked with child victims of human trafficking, DV victims, and decided to go to law school because I didn't necessarily appreciate the way that my child victims were being represented. And so I just kind of learned that compassion is not necessarily the way to change systems. And so I decided to go to law school. And now I have just opened my firm and I represent criminal defendants. I also do credit advocacy and I pair that with being a realtor. So just making sure that first-time home buyers can purchase their first home. Yeah.
Where are you located and what is your firm's name?
So I'm located in Texas and my firm is Veronica Lockett Law. Very simple.
I didn't know you were in Texas. For the viewers, I kept telling her, hey, it's this time, my time, because I'm thinking we're in the same time zone. I'm in Florida. She's in Texas. So, but thank you so much. Just FYI, Veronica is very patient because we had some technical difficulties, but she was patient with us and make sure that we share this great episode with you all. To get started, we are going to start from your earliest memory and being in foster care. What did it mean to grow up in the system?
Okay. So it's funny when you sent me the questions, I was like, dang, my earliest memory, and the first thing that popped in my head was pig feet.
You know, I'm Haitian and they do pig feet in my country as well. But I do find a lot of people here, they're like, what? Yeah.
Yeah. So going into foster care, everyone makes decisions for you, right? Until you find your voice. And I eventually found mine at 16. But prior to that, I was placed in a home in Corpus Cove, Texas. So I didn't even stay in my home city, which is Austin, and that's where I am now. I was moved to Corpus Christi with a family that didn't know me. They didn't know my personality. They didn't know what I liked to eat, what I didn't like to. Going into someone else's home, it's very difficult to say, I don't eat that, right? Because you're taught to be appreciative for what's given to you. So my first recall when you asked the question was pig feet, pig ears, pigtails. And I just remember thinking, what the hell? This is gross. I'm not eating this. And I would just cry. when you asked the question, I immediately smelled chitlins, right? And so that's like a brain in my head when I think about it. Like I said, going into foster care, people are making decisions for you. You're a case file, you're a number, you're not necessarily a person. And you have to learn to speak up for yourself. You learn early that stability is not something that's promised, and so you learn to put up walls so that you don't get attached.
Yeah. Boy, oh boy. It's interesting how the first thing that came to your mind is the food, the smell and everything. I think that's one thing that people don't realize. Like when you are going through stuff, like all your senses or just, you know, if you were Spider-Man, it would be your Spidey senses. Like you can literally go back to that. And that's part of all like trauma. That's why I often say, let people heal and deal with the trauma how they can. And sometimes you get over some things and sometimes some stuff you just don't. You can close your eyes and see it and smell it and feel it and everything. And I'm so glad that we are having these conversations because we know there are people out there who are probably going through that, right? And at least kind of get them ready or sharing with them like, hey, there's a lot of us out there. It may not have been like a foster care. It may have been like a different situation for them. How did moving between places shape your sense of stability and trust in other people?
So you learn not to trust, right? You learn not to trust. You learn that you can only depend on yourself. Every move is like a silent reminder that you don't belong. Like, this is not my family. This is not where I belong. Don't get too comfortable. As a child, like I said, you start to build walls, right? You start to build walls and you create layers, barriers for people so that they're not able to come in and penetrate, right? Because you already have the hurt from the rejection that you feel because your parent doesn't necessarily choose you, right? They choose the alcohol, they choose the drugs, they choose the abusive man or woman in some cases. You have like a sense of wanting to belong, but then like there's a suspicion of why like people want you to belong. It's difficult. And so even I think I'm 44, even at 44, I still want to belong to something, to somebody, but it's hard. It's hard. And so I guess kind of one of the ways that I deal with it is I write. And so it's a skill or a coping mechanism that I picked up while in foster care because the page doesn't judge you. You can be as open and honest as you want. And then you can tear it up when you're done. But today I write and I write on it. I always say I don't write from the mountaintop because I don't have it all figured out. I try to write from the middle, the in-between spaces. And that's how I try to live my life now. I create my own sense of belonging.
Yes, I love that for you. Was there a person who helped you, guide you during that time?
Yeah, so I have she was my caseworker. Her name is Carolyn. And she's the godmother of my children. She's like a mom, we have our ups and our downs. We have our fallouts, you know.
You made us.
Her family is like my family. We have our fallouts too. I have a foster mom, or actually two foster families that I stay in contact with. Like I spend the holidays with everyone, so I like bounce around from different homes. Thanksgiving and Christmas if I'm not going anywhere. I also have like a school teacher who took an interest in me because math was really hard for me. Growing up with my mom, like I struggled. Math was something I struggled with. And I remember like getting spankings or my hand being paddled because I couldn't add and subtract. Multiplication was a hard concept for me. But in high school, we had this program called Content Mastery. And I had a teacher who really took an interest in making sure that I understood the math. And then it became easy. He saw that I kind of struggled with making friends in school. And so he was like, come join my track team. Like, you're skinny, you got a short torso, you have long legs, come run track. And so I ran track. So I always had people around me who took an interest in me because generally I'm a very quiet and to myself kind of person. And so though the individuals that took interest in me, I guess, picked up on that and just kind of found ways to like include me. And for the most part, I still speak to those individuals, except for my teacher. He's passed away.
Okay. I was actually going to ask about the teacher and their names. I think that now as adult, if we work a job, we spend a lot of time with our colleagues and coworkers. But as students, they spend a lot of time with the teachers. And I think it's so, so important for us to have people who really like what they do, who really care about people to be teachers, right? And of course, we're still fighting for teachers to get paid what they deserve because they really play a pivotal roles in the future, our children's lives and everybody. So I'm grateful that you had that teacher. I think everyone had that teacher. For me, I had a teacher. No one ever know her real name because we call her Mrs. C because she had like a long name. Like we're talking about. So Mrs. C was that person for me because I was born and raised in Haiti, and when I came here, I spoke no English, zero. And, I had the bullying and everything. Miss Cece was that person for me. And I love that we had that secret language. Like, whenever I felt uncomfortable, I felt hurt, or there was something wrong, she would look at me and she would know. Whether I was in the cafeteria, whether I was in class, if there was something wrong. So I don't know where she is. It's been so many years, but I'm always going to be grateful because, when you say things like this person saved my life, everyone say, well, it sounds very drastic. It's not, because at the time you were going through that, right? That's the person that showed up for you. And that's what it felt like. So I'm so glad that you had them. Let's talk about your involvement in the criminal justice system. What led to that?
Love, or I guess what I thought was love at the time.
Did you say love? Let's rephrase that.
I was love at the time. I was young, dumb, and what are they? I didn't know any better. But, it was a relationship that was marked by violence and control. I fought back. I try to dance. I'm not necessarily dance around my words because I'm working on some things with regard to that. But it was a relationship that was marked by violence and control. I fought back. I survived and was able, to go through prison and come out all right. Today, I think if I had known today, if I would have known today if I would have known then what I knew today, I don't think that I would have been mislabeled as the aggressor. My victim at the time was actually my abuser. And I just think that I think that at the time that I was getting in trouble with law enforcement, it was around the same time that domestic violence was kind of becoming recognized as an issue. And I just think that my involvement with the criminal justice system at that time, they just weren't as aware as they are today. And they didn't see me as a victim. They didn't see me as a young woman who was worthy of like protection, who was worthy of kind of the revolving door that I kept going through. But I think if we had the laws on the books back then that we have today, I absolutely would have been seen as the victim instead of mislabeled as the aggressor.
I'm glad you said that, but as Black women, right? Do you think a lot has changed for us in that area when it comes to domestic violence and dealing with the system and us being seen as victim? You think that has changed much?
No, if I'm being truly honest, I think no. I think that there's still a fight, and it's unfortunate that we have to fight. I think being one of maybe 4 or 5 Black attorneys doing CPS law and representing parents in a system where a good majority of the parents and children coming through there are African American. I've often had to take a very firm stance, and I was often seen as being aggressive instead of just being a zealous advocate. right? So no, I don't think it has changed, but and it's unfortunate that it's our responsibility, but the burden is placed upon us, right, to make sure that the listener, that the perceiver understands that I'm not being aggressive. I'm just being firm.
Yeah. Yeah. What your experience or, being incarcerated, how has that changed you both negatively and positively?
So I think negatively, it stripped me of my freedom for a really long time. So I only spent, well, I say only, right? But it felt like a century. So I was sentenced to 2 years in prison. I had completed 3 months on probation prior to being convicted and sentenced to prison. So didn't spend a full 2 years in prison, but it felt like a full 2 years in prison.
Yeah.
So I had children after going to prison. So I got out in 2003, and then I had a child in 2004 or 2005. That child is now 20, I think. I think she's 20. Don't tell her I said that. But I think like she's 20. But I remember things like not being able to like volunteer at her school for a really long time. Eventually, once she made it to middle school, I was able to serve on the PTA, but that came with a lot of pushback for me, right? The difficulties that I ran into with renting was hard. So trying to find jobs that would accept my background even after I became a social worker was difficult. You have to fight to get a law license.
Oh, we'll talk about that later.
That was hard. So I think that it has affected me in ways that I can't fully escape, but I'm not gonna say that I don't appreciate those experiences, because it's made me the advocate that I am today. Positively, it gave me time to like reflect on kind of where my life was headed.
Yeah.
I didn't talk to you about this, and I don't even think I've really written about it yet. But when I did go to prison, when I finally made it to my unit, I remember jumping up out of to myself. He is the reason why you're in here, like he meaning my abuser. He's the reason why you're in here because I was still writing him. I asked myself, why are you still writing him? Are you still making plans to go back and be with him? You're either going to end up dead or you're going to be back in here doing a longer sentence. And that day, I remember screaming out of my cell. I asked the officer for what's called an I-60, and I placed my abuser's name on the I-60, and I asked that they block him from being able to send me letters. When I blocked him, that meant that I couldn't write him. And so I just had like a light bulb moment. So it just really gave me time to like reflect, to confront myself, right? Like I never blame a victim. And someone in School of Social Work, his name is Dr. Mark, God rest his soul. But Dr. Andrew Mark said to me one time, you're not responsible for people abusing you, but you are responsible for how you respond. And I just remember that was hard to hear in the moment. But after I sat down, I sat with it. I said, well, you know what? You're right. And so I learned to accept my responsibility and staying and like being okay with realizing I accepted the abuse. And so now I strive to set clearer boundaries with myself and clearer boundaries with others so that I don't end up in that situation again.
Yeah. So, no, 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 no. I like long answers because that's how my brain works. I want like all the details. What advice would you give to people who've never experienced this type of abuse and how they can be of support for others? Because, 99% of the time, people just don't understand. I know for me, before I became educated around what it meant to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know. Some people don't like the word survivor, but what it meant for someone who was abused in any kind of way, to have people say, well, how could you? Why would you? I would have never done that. What advice would you give to people who never experienced that? and how they can show support, sympathy, empathy, whatever to others.
So, yeah, I think that the best support you can give is to be a good listener, right? You listen without judging, because if a person is coming to you, they're coming to you because they feel safe, right? And if you judge, and that happened to me before, if you judge, all you're doing is isolating them. You're isolating the survivor. And so I think you listen without judging. If you are able, you be a support, right? And so maybe the support is when that person has the strength to walk away, and it may take a couple of times. It took several times for me, right? When that person actually has the courage to leave, then maybe you assist in that. And I'm not saying like show up to their house and help them pack their belongings, but maybe you either let them stay with you, you help them find somewhere else to live if you're not comfortable with them living with you. You find a way to be a support, right? And if you're not able to judge because you can't put yourself in that situation, you can't put yourself in a situation where you would be physically abused, and think about other ways that maybe you might have been abused, right? So, like,
Love that, sir.
friendships can be one-sided. That is a form of abuse, right? And so, yeah, and so if you can't relate in that way, you definitely can relate in some way. And so I think that's how you come at it. I don't think that you intervene. I think you be a support, and do it without being judgmental so that you don't isolate the person.
Veronica, you just strike a nerve when you said friendship can be abusive if it's one-sided. I never thought it like that. And I think that, and I'm just being real here. I think that friendship with women have more of that. I mean, clearly I'm not a man, right? But I think friendship, like women friendship, can be very, very abusive at time. And I've experienced that. You know what? You just gave me the craziest idea. I should definitely have an episode because I just know too many women that my sub that has those type. But I do like the fact that you say, hey, if you can't put yourself in that, you're like, this would never happen to me. Just think of another situation. So I think that's that. So let's go and talk about what drew you to social work after prison.
I think after prison, I think I was trying to understand like myself. I think I was trying to understand my mom, but because haven't really talked about this, but like my last 6 months in prison, my mom and I were put on the same unit. She has passed away since, but we were on the same unit. My mom was serving a 36-year sentence, and I was only doing 2 years. But the warden put my mom on the same unit with me for the last 6 months of my stay. And the direction given to my mom was help her remain calm while she finishes thawing here. And
Your mom to help you remain calm? Oh,
well, I kind of was a bad actor, but I needed to get that out of my system, right? Like I was angry for a number of reasons. I was angry for having to grow up in foster care. I was angry for having to grow up so fast. I was angry that put the drugs down. I was angry that I had been in an abusive relationship, and I was angry that I was in prison. So I was angry. And I took that anger out the officers in the prison. It was not their fault that I was there. And, kind of once I came to reconciliation with it after I'd gotten out of prison, I wrote a I'm sorry letter to the prison guards. But, my mom and I were allowed to be in the same dorm. I was bunk 9 and she was bunk 10. And so that was real therapeutic for me, because I got a lot of my questions answered, and I felt like I could leave prison and go like focus on me as an adult now. And so when I went into social work, I went in with the mindset of I was going to go help other individuals who were a lot like me, but didn't have the ability to speak up for themselves. At least that's what I thought I was going to do in social work. And so that's what drew me to it, trying to figure out my life situation and then wanting to help others.
Yeah. Were there moments when your lived experience gave you insight on how to help others?
Okay.
I figured.
Yeah, okay. So I'm very good about reading people, right? Mostly because I walk in the shoes of a lot of people. I'm good with reading silence. I'm good with reading body language. I listen to what's not being said. I can see fear in like a parent's eyes. I know when someone's bullshitting me, right? Because at the end of the day, it all comes down to survival, right? Like person just trying to survive. And I think what used to frustrate me when I was doing parent representation in CPS matters is that people weren't people, right? What was frustrating is that the professionals I felt like they could not put themselves in another person's shoes. I felt like the expectations were like way too high, right? When we're looking at how people are living, right? I feel like expectations were way too high. Wanting someone to find permanent housing in order to close out a CPS case when we live in one of the most expensive cities in Texas is an unrealistic expectation, right? And so I don't know. I think that there are just some things that because of my life experiences I'm able to do that other professionals aren't, and it's not something that could be learned from a book. And you can't pay for it through a class. Yeah.
So, what made you go from social worker to attorney?
Because you're limited in your ability to you're limited in your ability to advocate. So I was living in Houston at the time, and I was working for a nonprofit, and they had a grant through the Department of Justice to work with victims of human trafficking. I specifically worked with child victims of human trafficking. I was the social worker at the time. I was providing counseling and case management, not just to the child, but also to the family. And I just really got tired of attorneys showing up in court, talking to me for like 2 or 3 minutes, and then going in and making recommendations to a judge about a family that they didn't spend any time with, right? And I remember saying to myself, well, damn, if this is all they got to do, I can go be a lawyer too. I always wanted to be an attorney. I think when I started getting into trouble, like I thought that was not possible. But, after talking with one of my mentors about my desire, she let me know that there was a school in Dallas that was opening up. They weren't yet accredited, but one of the judges had stepped down from the federal bench and was like, you want to know what? I want to start a law school for people who are like second career, can't get into other law schools for various reasons. He wanted it to be low cost and he wanted people to go off and, work in the nonprofit or indigent arena. And so I chose to go to that law school and the rest is history.
Law school. We know that is super hard to get into law school. We know the path is crazy. It's probably going to be one of the most expensive it's a lot. But especially if you have a background. What barriers did you face and how did you overcome them?
So going to law school was about turning like pain into power, right? And so that meant that there were things that I had to like figure out how to get over. Oftentimes I felt like, and sometimes I still do feel like I'm in spaces and places that I don't belong, right? So I had to like be comfortable with that, right? And then going to law school after being out of school for several years was intimidating. And then I started law school homeless with 2 children.
What?
Yeah, I started homeless.
Okay, keep going.
Yeah, I started homeless with 2 children. I didn't know what schools I was going to put them in. Like my housing plan had fallen and we had to live in a hotel for like the first 3 weeks. That was difficult. I often felt like like I said, like an outsider. Like they say imposter syndrome, like that's real, and I still feel like I experience it. But I had to remind myself that I was there for, like every child, every parent, every individual, people like myself who needed a voice and didn't have one. And so I didn't have a choice. I had to get through it, right? Like I had uprooted my family from Houston and moved to Dallas. And so I had to get through it. My ex-husband was he helped me a lot in law school. Like he helped make sure that I didn't have to worry about my rent and things like that. The great thing is that the school was a public school in Texas, waives tuition for foster youth. And so I didn't have to worry about tuition. I only had to worry about how I was going to pay my bills. And that didn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. If you could redesign one part of the system, whether it's the legal system, all three of them actually, if you could redesign one part of the systems, what would it be? What would you start?
I think for the criminal justice system, I think that we need to understand that punishment is not rehabilitation. I think that for the foster care system, we need to understand that parents and children are resilient. And I think for the legal system, we need to understand that behind every case is a human being, and that human being has pain, has trauma, and they have their own story. I think it needs to be about accountability coupled with compassion. Yeah. And I think that we need to learn how to connect with people on a human level.
That's real. I I mean, I love your answer. It's real and I have nothing else to add to that. What gives you hope when the system feels stacked against many people like yourself?
What gives me hope is watching not just parents, but I also represented in the criminal justice system, I represented individuals who were diagnosed with a serious mental illness or an intellectual disability. And so watching those people, those individuals get through a difficult time, right? It's hard to accept that I have a mental illness, right? Like I understand that it's hard for people to accept that. It's hard to it's hard for a parent to say, I have a drug addiction and I struggle to take care of my children. I think it's hard just to say I need help, right? But what gives me hope is that the families get through it, right? Like they come together, they pull together and they get through it. And they're all right. And it's even more rewarding, I guess is the word. Yeah, rewarding or maybe even empowering on the other side, when they don't have to come back, when they don't have to re-encounter those systems again. When the system gets it right, that's what gives me hope.
Yeah. Yeah. What message do you have for young people who are currently in foster care or maybe people who are facing incarceration and thinking like this is it for me. Like I could never, achieve my goals or, do the things that I want to do in the future. What would you say to them?
So I can say this today, right? If I couldn't say it back then, but I think that the message is more than what has happened to you. You don't have to succumb to the label that's been placed on you. I embrace being a convicted felon because there's not many attorneys that can say, I am a convicted felon and this is how I've gotten through it. So you can overcome it. Is it going to be easy? No, but it can be done. Your story doesn't have to stop at convicted felon. It doesn't have to stop at foster care, former foster care youth. It doesn't have to stop at survivor of domestic violence. You've got the power to change like the next chapter in your life. And so you just got to put in the work and do that.
Yeah. That I'm pretty sure. And I think that, of course, you're still learning. You're learning as you go and you're still trying to navigate, those difficult situations. How would you want your story to impact others? Anybody?
Yeah. So, like I said, I write a lot. I write a lot and I actually blob openly about my life. And so when I'm doing that, when I am blogging and when people read it and when they leave comments about how hearing my experience makes them think differently about things, that's the impact that I want people to know that you're not the only one that's been through it, that's going through it, that will go through it. And like I said, you have the power to write the next chapter in your life. And you just have to be willing to do the hard work.
Yeah, definitely. So I mean, I could ask a zillion other questions, but I think that, your story is a wonderful story and that it is going to be something that helps others. You blog, thinking about writing a book? Because I know you journal. So is a book part of the near future?
Yeah, it is. So yeah, it is on the WordPress, Veronica Unfiltered. And yes, it is. I do I want to write the book? No.
You don't have to these days, but you have an amazing story. And I
Yeah.
think that, and especially in this world that we live in, everybody think everything is perfect. Everybody's perfect.
Yeah.
I think it would be very, very helpful. So we are going to step away from the heavy stuff for a little bit. Let's get to know you on a different level. What do you do for fun?
What do I do? I don't know. I'm a work. Well, no, I read. I read. So I guess one of my favorite authors would be like Airdrome. And so I like his books. I like James Patterson as writer.
Oh,
So those are the books that I like to read. And then there are other books that I like to read. And one that I read that kind of helped me like evaluate relationships. And one that I gave to my clients was the book was called Good Enough not oh, if you wouldn't have asked me, if I wouldn't have wanted to talk about it, but it was a self-help book. It helped me to like evaluate my boundaries with individuals. It was really a relationship book, but as you read it, you can really apply it to any type of relationship. And so I like to read books like that. I've been reading, I guess it's like a biography about Justice Brennan. In law school, we learned about him. We learned about a lot of his writings in civil procedure. And one of his lines that stuck with me the most is if you put your widgets out into the stream of commerce, you can necessarily expect to be held into the court of law. And so every time like I heard about Justice Brennan, I was like, I gotta read about this man. So I've been reading about Justice Brennan. And then like I said, I've been working on trying to pull together well, I did pull together a law firm where I work on credit issues for whatever reason that intrigues me. And so I stepped away from my job to do that. I'm a mom. I have two children. Rainey is 20 and Ryan is 13. Yeah, 13.
this and I'm trying to get you in trouble here. We're just, you know, a teen and yeah, we don't want to get in trouble with the children. So you have a boy and a girl?
Boy and a girl, and I was done.
Okay, yeah, I have a girl. And then I am also a realtor. I don't really use the license much lately, but I we have that in common. I'm obsessed with credit. I'm obsessed anything credit. So we definitely have that in common. So how do people find you? How do they connect with you? If they wanted to, if they are in Texas and they needed your help with whatever, real estate, law, how do they find you?
So they can find me at veronicalockettlaw.com. Again, I'm working on boundaries. And so going through the website on my contact page, if you want to send me an inquiry, and I feel like your issue is something that I am able to assist with, then we'll set up a consultation and have a talk. But yeah, through the website, if you want to read about my story, I'm on WordPress. You can just Google veronicaunfiltered.com and I have a website there where I blog about life in relationships and work. I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook.
Love it. So obviously this podcast is called Lawyers Have Souls Too because we want to share these stories. And I have to say, by far, I don't want anybody to get upset at me. By far, this is my favorite episode because it was just so real and raw and not, I don't like the fluffy stuff. I always say that. I really, because you already live in this world of everything is perfect. Everybody has to put up a front. Everybody has to present a certain way. And I'm saying this especially for Black women. There's just so much. You know, you got to look a certain way. You got to dress a certain way. You cannot say this. You cannot say that. You know, it's just everything. There's a lot of scrutiny around what we do. So I applaud you. I am so proud of you. I am super excited for your journey. I think this is only the beginning for you because when you really use that pain and turn it into power, baby, nothing can stop you. I mean, it's just something about that. So obviously, we're not saying, you know, we are happy for anything that happened to anybody, but I think once you are able to get to the other side, I think that that's where it's really impactful. So my question to you, or the sentence that you have to finish, is lawyers have souls too because
we're human, right? I know we can be robotic at times because we're all about policies and statutes and laws, but we're human as well. I think we have to remember that. We have feelings, we have lives, we have children. We grew up in families, right? We're human.
yeah. Love it. All right, everyone. This was Miss Veronica, and as I told her, this was one of my favorite episode. I am just so proud of her. This story was just real. And this is what we're about. We want to bring real people, real stories. This is more than a story about hardship. It's a story about redemption, purpose, legacy, and truly the soul of a lawyer, which she shared with us. Thank you, Veronica, for being here. I really appreciate you. I cannot wait to share your story and this story with the rest of the world. Everyone else who were ahead of time and had read her stuff, good for you. But here, this is our first time. Thank you so much. I am so glad that you were able to make it despite all the technical difficulty. I will see you on the other side, and I think I will bring you back in. I feel like there's so much more we can talk about. Thank you so much.
Very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.